Hello cake friends, let's make this beautiful flower ruffle cake. I start with a white coated cake with buttercream, and I was just smoothing it to make sure that it's pretty smooth. Also, so that I don't have to use a lot of food coloring for my cake, I use the white coated cake and then use a very thin colored buttercream with that, so that I don't have to use a ton of food coloring, because sometimes using a ton of food coloring really scares me, and especially with red colored, right? It's sometimes it can be even hard to achieve with this deep color. That's why I like to use a thin coated buttercream. This way I don't have to use much of the food coloring, because I only use very less amount of colored buttercream needed to coat this cake, instead of coloring the whole crumb coated cake with red buttercream. Anyway, you know what I mean. So I make sure that it started with cold cake to begin with, and then keep using the spatula to add it. At least that's how I'm just using a thin coated one, and use a scraper to trying to coat the whole cake. And I'll create like somewhat a texture with this kind of method. It's not gonna be super perfect, but I think that is the idea, that using this method you will have some sort of like I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of it's a little bit imperfect. Like, you still have, it looks very professional, but like you still have that kind of, you see that texture a little bit, and that is totally cool. Like, I think I love that texture. And with colored coated cake, I like to use my acrylic disc to start with, and then move it to a regular cardboard that I put a ribbon on it, this way, because this is for a client, right? And with acrylic disc before, I can make a whole mess of the color. Like, it's totally okay. And then once I transfer it, then I can use the finaling, it's just the final touch, so that this cardboard is not gonna be super messy with white food coloring, and then it's just kind of hard to, it's messy, and then I have to like clean it afterwards. So I just don't want to do that. So I rather use my acrylic disc to make a mess, and then do the final touch on this cardboard cake that I'm using for a client. I still have to do a cleanup, but it's not going to be too bad. You want to use a petal tip, any kind of petal shape tip that looks like this, and I like to use a very thin one. The Korean piping tips is usually the one that create a thinner petal, in my opinion, and I like to use that better. And here I use a combination of purple, light purple, and also a lighter purple, and I put it in the piping tip before I put the piping tip in the piping bag, and then I just fill it more with the buttercream, kind of like a lighter purple, and also the whitish purple one. That way I have like a gradient of color. And for a fatter petal, I was trying to use my, I don't know what is this still called, but like, I was starting to make it thinner. Sorry, like I've totally forgot. Anyway, so once I do that, then I can put it on the cake, and then put the even pressure, and just making sure your petal tip, the narrower one, like facing outward, so you'll have a thinner petal like on the, you know, the outside and not the inside that was touching the cake. And like, yeah, the fatter part of that petal is like inside touching the cake, and then the narrower part of the tip is facing outside. That way you have the thinner part of the petal is like facing outward, and you pretty much use a different angle, right? Like when I did that, like that's how you create the petal and the flowers. And for the center, I just used the golden yellow for the center, and putting the tip, putting even pressure each time, and then like put, release, put, release, put, release. So that's how I did it. And you continue a little bit until you're happy with the center, and that's how you create your first flower. And if your buttercream is getting a little bit too warm, you can always have your ice pack ready, and then sort of rotate your piping tip with the ice pack and around it, so that it's not gonna get too soft, which is gonna have sort of very messy petal. Like it's very fat and it's not gonna be very defined petal. I think that one gets a little bit too soft on me, so I decided to, you know, cool it a little bit more, and then when I try it again, like it seems better. So yeah, so be patient with yourself. If you find that, oh gosh, like the texture just doesn't seem right, you can always cool your buttercream a little bit, but not too hard, because it's for piping especially, it's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be hard to pipe. Like you want it soft enough to pipe, but not too soft that it's gonna create like a mess, not mess, like, you know, not defined flower. With practice, you can do that. So I created my second flower there. It's pretty much however placement that where you want to create it, but it's that movement of like, with even pressure, you're going sort of like petal shape, like up and round and down with each time. Like, right, you see like how I move my wrist in a way that it's sort of like creating that petal, like how, and yeah, so but with pressure, it's gonna guide you also for that, to create that petal. Like just watch for how I move my wrist and creating, like it's having like a very slight movement where you're gonna create that petal. And for the center one, you see like I use a smaller piping tip for that center one to create a smaller petal, of course. And then again for the stamen in there, you use yellow as well. You know, trying to create a, you know, it doesn't have to be all have the same number of petal, right? Like depending on however number of petal that you can fit in. Like over there I just decided to use 4, like a smaller petal tip. That works totally fine. And you have a bigger flower, a smaller flower, and here just like a random single or double petal apart from, it's not really a flower, right? Like it's just a offset petals, and I think that is pretty also. So don't feel like you have to create you know, a complete flower each time. You can have a very random petal as you go. And I use a darker purple there, so having a variation of lighter and darker color of the flower, it's also my favorite. Yeah, and I have just pretty much have fun with it. I know that's like I always say, but you know, once you have the movement down of how you're gonna create that petal, it's really fun to create because once you have the piping bag ready and everything, it's pretty quick method to create this beautiful petal flower, ruffle petal flower. And I think the longest part was trying to color the buttercream, of course, like coating the, coloring with this red color and then coating the cake. But like the decorating of the flower part was pretty easy once you have the colored purple and then putting it in the piping bag. I think it's pretty good. And look at that, it's already sort of like coming together with random single or double petal, and with the florals, some small darker purple, and then I decided to have a kind of like a random yellow also, not just as for the center of the flower but on the cake as well, and just like a small flower there. I thought that creates a very but then I don't know, I wasn't sure, so I was just trying it out, and then I was like, I think I could have just left it like that, but I don't know, maybe I was being too perfectionist that I decided to scrape it off. But yeah, like for the single petal, I decided to still keep that yellow, and I think that is pretty. It adds just a little touch. I feel that sometimes with cake, it kind of bring everything together. At least that's how I felt. This is what I feel with this little dot. And you can like that sometimes happen, like accidents happen, and this is when my buttercream is a bit harder, that when I try to pipe, like it's not smooth all, like it come off broken. So that's when you're trying to, I used to use my hands to like sort of warm it up a little bit, and in the meantime I use my other piping bag with this lighter purple that I'm gonna use that while the other one is sort of like warm up a little bit and not be too cold. And yeah, so it's useful to have two piping bags. If you have one bigger one and one smaller one, you can create one for the bigger flower, and then also when the other one is too soft or too because it's too warm or if it's too cold, that you can use the other one, so that the one that's giving you problem, you can try to fix it in the meantime while you still continue decorating. But yeah, having that variation of lighter purple and darker purple and the yellow center here, and it's just, I don't know, I'm just so full in love with this, and the client also loved it. So I was so happy, and I hope this is helpful. I hope that you're enjoying this tutorial, and good luck and keep on caking.